F1, marketed as F1 the Movie, is a 2025 American sports drama film. The film was directed by Joseph Kosinski from a screenplay by Erwin Kruger and a story written by the two and produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. All three previously worked together on Top Gun: Maverick. In the 1990s, Sonny Hayes was a rising star in Formula One until a devastating crash derailed his career. Now, 3 decades later, a failing F1 team persuades him to make an unexpected comeback. Teaming up with their fiery rookie driver, Sonny discovers that chasing greatness and redemption means learning to rely on more than just himself. All right, so I've gotten the amazing chance to watch F1 in theaters. I experienced this in IMAX, as it should be. I think F1 is a must-watch in IMAX for just the full adrenaline-pumping racing visuals. I think it definitely excels in that category. Like 80 to 85% of this movie is pure racing. It's very fast-paced, very exhilarating. And yeah, it's just very exciting overall. I do have to point out, though, and I'm just realizing this now, the theater that I went to watch this film, it's much known for like its ambience and like how the crowd is like quite reactive. They'll applaud, they'll gasp. It's a very reactive crowd, and it's the same crowd that I watched not Top Gun: Maverick, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And I'm not sure if there have already been like comparisons made between The Final Reckoning and F1 yet, but I'm quite sure that there will be if none have already been made. Particularly because of the two main leads. You have Brad Pitt in one corner, you have Tom Cruise in the other corner. Both men, I believe, are like in their early 60s, quite old, for the industry. Or I guess at least quite old to be leading these summer blockbusters, But I mean, I do have to say, I think F1, all right, I'll say it like this. The Final Reckoning which I didn't really appreciate, by the way. I wasn't really a fan of that film. The Final Reckoning is what I expected. F1 was what I expected The Final Reckoning to be. That's what I meant to say. I think F1 is just a lot more exhilarating, a lot more exciting. I think it takes a lot more actually, maybe it doesn't take a lot more creative risks. I think what F1 does also lack a lot of more original plot points in a way, but I think it's just a lot more adrenaline pumping. There's some iffy moments in the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning that I felt sort of took me away as an audience member, as opposed to F1, where I was just fully engrossed the entire time. I was fully captivated on the edge of my seats in some particular moments, especially towards the finale. So I think F1 is, I don't want to make this comparison, obviously, but I do think F1 is the better movie. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I just had to point that out. But anyways, let's get on to F1 itself. Joseph Kosinski, who actually also led Tom Cruise in Top Gun: Maverick, which is another incredible film, highly lauded as one of the best movies of that particular year in 2022. I kind of have to give it to Joseph Kosinski. I haven't watched any of his other films. I know he made this like kind of iffy Netflix movie called Spiderhead, which apparently that didn't really do well, or like didn't really have great critics' reactions to it. But the fact that he was able to make Top Gun: Maverick and F1, both incredible blockbusters in the span of 3 years, that just speaks to his masterful artistry. And I have to say that the first-person point of views that he uses or utilizes in this film, and the camera angles, it really makes you feel inside. It makes you feel like you're inside the cockpit, alongside Pitt, alongside Idris. So yeah, shout out to Joseph Kosinski. The fact that, he still got it, to be honest. I have no idea how old he is, but just to be able to direct those two in the span of 3 years, it's very, very masterful indeed. The storytelling, I think this is where this movie kind of lacks. To be honest, the storytelling is actually not bad. It is seamless. What I respect about the storytelling is that it never loses the intensity of the sport itself. Like, it never loses the intensity of racing, because at the end of the day, this kind of is a racing movie. It's not just a racing movie. It has character arcs and stuff like that. But what I respect is that it never lost its intensity to the sport. It never, focused on a subsection or like a minor plot detail. Like for example, both the characters, Brad Pitt and Jameson Idris, I'm forgetting the Sonny and JP, I believe, Joshua Pierce. They both have their own flaws. They both have their own issues. But I appreciate the film doesn't try to, tackle those issues quite too hard. It really focuses on the present moment. It doesn't meander into the past, which I like. And so, yeah, it never felt like it was losing track of what was really important, which is kind of it's like the racing, the thrills of this movie. And that's what kind of leverages it in the end. The film also explores themes of teamwork, passion, self-belief, living in the moment. The stuff that happens inside this movie world are very spontaneous and very exciting, of course. The character arcs I mentioned before, they're quite layered, to be honest. They're quite layered, more than I expected in a way. I don't think I'd go as far as to say they're emotionally resonant. I think Sonny's past, as tragic as it is, I think that was a bit more emotionally resonant than, but the other characters. The only characters that really have any soul in life kind of are just Sonny and Joshua Pierce, which granted, they are the leads, but even Javier Bardem's character, I understand, they have something to prove, but I never really, yeah, there was a sense of urgency to his character, he wanted to do well, but I never got that emotional resonance that I did from the other characters. And so that's why I felt his character was quite a bit lackluster in comparison to the others. But overall, I felt like the arcs, especially JP's arc, is very, very much layered. But yeah, I did mention before, this is kind of a racing film. You could label it as a racing film, but you can't neglect the fact that it does bring depth to the leads. Brad Pitt himself, I think, or especially embodies a seasoned racer role perfectly. I thought he knocked this role out of the park. He has great chemistry with the supporting cast. There's like a romance, like love interest in the middle of the film, which, I was like, okay, this is quite of a, that love interest plot, like subplot did kind of remind me of Top Gun Maverick. I felt like that's when I sort of got the sense like, okay, Kosinski's kind of falling back into his, previous plot stuff, I guess, previous subplots that he used in other films. But I thought, Brad Pitt had great chemistry, especially with Jameson Idris, who plays JP. By the way, shout out to Jameson Idris. I didn't even give this shout out before. Shout out to Jameson Idris. That's my boy from Snowfall. It's great to see him making, I don't believe this is his feature film debut, but it's awesome to see him, at least making his debut in a huge summer blockbuster. He definitely deserves it. He's a very seasoned actor. So I hope he doesn't get written off as, like a one-time person. He's talented. He's been talented throughout the last 5 to 10 years. He's kind of gone unnoticed. What else? So I appreciate his transformation into this character. I thought he did a wonderful job. As much as Brad Pitt, we can give him his flowers. We got to give Idris his flowers as well. The mental and physical transformations he did to become a race driver for the role, I thought was very compelling. His character overall, I thought was pretty well executed. He's this hotshot rookie, but he's also, him and Pitt go back and forth, and it felt very believable. It was very realistic. The cinematography is outstanding. Especially during the race scenes for sure. Very tight and very fast paced. Well executed overall. The film also includes a lot of technical F1 elements, which I of course appreciated. I don't watch F1 in real life. It's not necessarily sort of like the sport that I like watching. And so I think going into this, I was like, okay, there's definitely going to be some terminology thrown around that I might not understand. But overall, I feel like I understood what was happening. They made it pretty easy. They talked about, I think the main issue that I was able to understand that happens throughout the film is tire degradation, which I believe is a huge main factor for race drivers. So I felt that was pretty explained clearly. And so yeah, I definitely think this is not just captivating for fans of F1, but just fans that are not. What I also appreciate about this film, I think I mentioned this before already. There wasn't any unnecessary drama. They didn't, I mentioned this. They didn't meander into the past and stuff like that. Or they didn't if there were conflicting moments between characters, it was always sort of off-written by the racing scenes, which, for better or for worse, the race scenes do dominate. They're just nonstop excitement, and which sort of it can be a weakness and a strength, because I don't really see myself rewatching this film very soon. And if I do, it's mainly just going to be for the final race scene or for the other, heavy climactic moments on this film, like the action-packed scenes. I think a lot of the argumentative scenes, the other conversational scenes, they're kind of just plot filler in a way. They're very exposition-y. So I think the race scenes do dominate in this film. I will say though, the humor, the witty banter, I love that from Sonny, from Brad Pitt's character. It adds charm, it adds lightness to the film. Because this film can get intense. There's some intense dramatic moments, but it is also light in some other moments. And I think that's what makes it such a good, family movie blockbuster overall. Hans Zimmer. I had literally had no idea Hans Zimmer, because I think I looked away during the opening credits when his name popped up, so I had no idea who's the composer of this film. But Hans Zimmer just does an amazing, amazing job. He delivers a high-octane score that fuels a lot of the action beats. During the race scenes especially, it is hugely appreciated. It is so electrifying. The movie also features surprise appearances, especially Lewis Hamilton, who I do know. I know Lewis Hamilton. He plays himself, sort of like a rival race driver. So I believe he was a producer on this movie, so it's cool. But yeah, I mean, overall, I kind of just mentioned this. The story is this movie's ultimate weakness. It's quite formulaic. It's basically a mashup of most underdog, cliched, triumphant stories, It's nothing we've seen before. And so by that coin, I could really see the ending of this movie from miles away. But does that mean I didn't appreciate it? No, of course not. I very much appreciated the ending of this film. I thought this film overall had a great mix of realism and cinematic flair and some even over-the-top moments. This was a great cinematic experience for me overall. No pun intended, it had a very strong finish that actually left quite a lasting impact on me, even though this isn't a very much drama-filled film. I just couldn't get this movie out of my head a couple hours after finishing it. So I definitely think overall this is a movie worth experiencing. Even though it can be maybe exhausting at times with the repetitiveness, I will say there are some beats or plot points that feel like they've happened they keep happening again and again, and you're in your head you're thinking okay, will this movie ever progress? But I mean, it does, and it's very triumphant in the end. Although you could maybe see it miles away, it's just electrifying. It's one of those electrifying, triumphant movies. Maybe you can turn your brain off for just a bit and just experience the thrills in IMAX, and I would still call that a win. But even then, I think there are some character arcs that can be appreciated. There is some substance to some of these characters. Brad Pitt's performance is incredible. And he's shown that after all of these years, he's still got it. And what else could you, if there's could be one tagline for this movie, it's that Brad Pitt still got it. And so yeah, that's basically it. That's all I've got. Hope you enjoyed this review, and see you later. Also, I forgot to mention, but this movie is an 8 out of 10. That is my rating for F1, an 8 out of 10. See ya.